The United States can strike Iran whenever it wants. That's what President Donald Trump is now confirming as negotiations with Tehran move forward. The United States military has asked intelligence officials to come up with ideas for an unconventional punishment against Iran. And at the same time, the international intelligence community is working around the clock to locate chemical weapons and other stockpiles inside Iran amid serious concerns that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps may be planning a non-conventional attack. The Revolutionary Guards are threatening a preemptive strike on Israel if the talks with the United States will fall. And following the Iranian cyber attack against water systems in the United States, Israel's cyber defensive system is going on the offensive to protect Israel's critical infrastructure. This is what also is happening in this war against Iran, cyber operations. Oil prices are falling to their lowest level in 3 weeks after Trump canceled the planned strike on Iran and announced the opening of negotiations. Iran's president is calling to force the United States to stick to the Memorandum of Understanding. And under the shadow of war, Iran is tightening its grip on its proxies all across the Middle East. They have one goal: to make Trump pay a heavy price. The attack in Damietta, Egypt, is changing the rules of the game in the Middle East. And now it is clear that Iran's proxies are expanding the circle of threats. In the Gaza Strip, the IDF continued the strikes against Hamas terrorists, while major gaps continue to delay the disarmament of the terrorist organization. I'm Yair Pinto. Joining me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground. We bring you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and about the war against this evil that is terrorizing the neighborhood, the Middle East, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Today is August 3rd. So let's begin. Because under the pressure of an aggressive United States naval blockade, President Donald Trump canceled a planned strike on Iran at the last minute, following heavy pressure from Saudi Arabia. And at the same time, the United Arab Emirates is demanding that the United States president take decisive military steps and expand the campaign against the Revolutionary Guards. Trump announced overnight that Washington intends to sign 2 agreements with Iran. One concerning the Strait of Hormuz, and another one concerning the dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. One day after announcing the cancellation of the planned strike on Iran, President Trump said that contacts between the sides are underway and expressed optimism about the possibility of reaching understandings. And speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, Trump said that there is a deal with Iran on the Strait of Hormuz, and there will be a deal on the dismantling of the nuclear weapons. What we're doing now is talking with them through negotiations. However, Trump made clear that if the Iranians try to run away from the understandings or simply buy more time, the United States can act against them whenever it wants. So the United States military has asked intelligence officials to think of creative and unconventional ways to punish Iran. The unusual request was sent after weeks of strikes that failed to produce a breakthrough, and amidst the assessment that destroying Iran's nuclear facilities may require the deployment of ground forces. British spies are now taking part in the secret operation deep inside Iran, aimed at locating the commercial chemical weapons stockpiles that could be used for drone attacks against the neighboring countries, including Israel and including the United Arab Emirates. And we will bring you all the details very shortly. United States intelligence agencies have determined that Iran or other groups acting on its behalf may be able to recover its highly enriched uranium from its central stockpile, even though that stockpile was buried underneath the ruins of the nuclear facility in Isfahan after the American strikes last June. And according to the assessments, the Iranian regime may be able to reach the radioactive material through a very narrow access point that remains inside the compound. The uranium, enriched to roughly 60%, is stored in gas form inside specialized containers. However, intelligence officials note that it is still unclear how long it will actually take to reach those containers and remove them from the site. And we will soon go deeper into the details and into the question of what options the United States has to prevent all of this. After reports in the United States yesterday that an Iranian cyber attack caused damage to the water systems in 7 states, Israel's National Cyber Directorate confirmed all of this, that Israel is also experiencing cyber attacks on its water systems on a daily basis, and precisely during the ceasefire between the United States and Iran, while everyone was focused on negotiations, senior Revolutionary Guards officials were preparing for the next phase in order to raise the price that the United States would pay during the ceasefire. So Iranian generals held secret discussions with commanders of the pro-Iranian militias all across the region. This is in order to expand the war if the United States renews or intensifies its strikes against Iran. And against the backdrop of multi-front escalations across the Middle East, and also a joint wave of US and Saudi strikes against Iran's regional arms, the Kingdom of Jordan has found itself at the center of an unprecedented regional storm. Jordan issued an unusual and also explicit warning to Iraq. Any attack launched from Iraqi territory towards Jordan will be answered with immediate fire and without hesitation. The Houthi terrorist organization in Yemen have also suffered another blow in the recent days. This is after an attempt to infiltrate the Yemeni army positions in the southern parts of the country. So this attempt ended in failure. And the Yemeni army replied that the infiltration attempt by the Houthi rebels, and they eliminated 5 terrorists. So this comes amidst a series of mysterious assassinations that target senior Houthi figures. And according to the reports, the chain of events is increasing the questions about Houthi control on the ground and raising assessments of internal power struggles. And since the attack by the Iranian Proxy from Iraq against Egypt, the rules of the game in the Middle East have changed completely. For the first time in this latest war, an Egyptian port that serves as a central hub for exporting and storing natural gas has become a target in the regional conflict. Damietta is not just another commercial port. It is one of the most important liquefied natural gas facilities in the Eastern Mediterranean, serving as a central hub for exporting natural gas to European markets. Any disruption to its activity goes far beyond Egypt and affects the global energy markets. The strike on the Egyptian port is not just a single security incident. It is a signal that the regional conflict is expanding into new arenas. And if Iran or its proxies were able to strike a strategic target in the heart of Egypt, it means that the regional threat has changed dramatically. And the fighting in the Gaza Strip still continues. On Sunday, as questions emerge over how a possible ceasefire framework between Israel and the Hamas terrorist organization would be implemented, Israeli officials are making clear that any military withdrawal depends on the full disarmament of the Hamas terrorist organization. Whatever remains at the center of the dispute surrounding the proposed agreement is based on disarming Hamas. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Shoshani, and we're here on Boots on the Ground. We bring you the full truth about what is happening in Israel in this war, so that you will know how to pray for the situation. And today is August 3rd. But before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth. Share this content with as many people as possible. Hit on the subscribe button, leave a comment, and let me know where you are watching this video from, okay? That's how you help us. You can also search us up on our social media platforms, Yair Pinto and also Shoshani, and see how life moves on here in Israel during war. Now, many Israelis are struggling. They're juggling reserve duty while trying to get back to work and also handle their day-to-day lives. It's not easy. I'm telling you this firsthand. Your mind is overloaded. The pressure doesn't stop when the uniform is coming off. I've been there, coming home from reserves, trying to be present for my family, catching up at work while still feeling like I'm in a survival mode. It takes strength, energy, and faith to push through. That's why I started using Vinya. It's an Israeli supplement made from red grape cells that helps improve the blood flow to your heart, your brain, and your muscles. For me, that meant better focus, more energy, and fewer days of that foggy, burnt-out feeling. I started using it during my reserve duty, and I'm still using it today. There's also a coffee and a tea version. And my favorite is the hydration powder that I like to take in the morning after a very hot night here in the Middle East. I recommend you try it for yourself. Go to TBNIsrael.com. Again, that's TBNIsrael.com or call 800-638-1944. 800-638-1944. TBNIsrael.com. That's a great way to be healthy and also to help us create more content from the region, from Israel, from what's happening here. Okay, so let's continue. And let's turn to our senior Middle East correspondent, the one and only, Mati Shoshani. Mati, is the real story here not that Trump canceled the strike, but that Iran has discovered that it does not actually need to defeat the United States. It only needs to frighten America's allies.
I think that's a really good question. And we have to go into the psychology of the war that's taking place here. Because what we've seen is that oftentimes the public perception is greater in its influence than the facts on the ground, the facts of the war. And I'll give you a simple example. The Strait of Hormuz has effectively been open almost the entirety of this war. What that means practically is that if someone, some entity, wanted to ship their goods, their oil, through the Strait of Hormuz, they could or do that or receive the escort of the United States Navy in traveling through that. And almost any given day of the week, with very rare exceptions, the ship would be able to make it through the strait. But ships aren't traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. Why are they not traveling through the Strait of Hormuz? Because they're afraid of what the Iranians might do. Not what they are doing, not what they are actively doing on the ground or on the sea, what they're threatening that might be done to them. And that threat alone is sufficient to prevent much of the travel through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, there's a bigger picture here that has to do with the economics and the impact of this war and the closure, or at least partial closure, of the Strait of Hormuz. But really, the big point here is the perception, in the sense that in this asymmetrical war, Iran, who has not won on a military level, is able to withstand the ongoing military campaign by the United States and earlier by Israel, and to continue to put public pressure and fear in the hearts of the CEOs, in the hearts of the insurers, of the underwriters of the insurance policies, of the different trade companies who decide not to travel through the Strait of Hormuz. And this is just one of many different examples. And there's another point here, which is that they really didn't ever need to win this war, because this is not a question of who has a stronger army, but rather a question of what is the incentive package and how much suffering are they willing to endure. And I'll explain that sentence. The Iranians are willing to see their country burn. They're willing to see the economies of their own country and the countries around them take a substantial hit that will take decades to fix. They are willing to see tens of thousands of casualties of their own people. Not only that, they've actually been themselves the ones to eliminate their own population just before this war started. On the other hand, stands the United States, who has a sensitivity to the loss of life and the loss of assets. Stand the U.S. allies, the Emirates, the Saudis, the Qataris to a lesser degree, and of course Israel, who are sensitive to civilian loss of life, who are sensitive to the loss of infrastructure, and who are willing to go to great lengths to avoid the damage to those assets, be them human or material in their nature. And when you have that very, very unbalanced nature of a relationship, one side, Iran, who's willing to watch everything around it burn and be destroyed, and the other side that sanctifies life and tries to build an economy and a success and a life for its people, you combine those two, it's very hard, almost impossible, to find a meeting place between them. Because Iran wants to see destruction, and Iran is willing to sustain substantial hits, death, destruction to their own people to be able to see that materialize. And on the other side, you have a side that is far more, sensitive to suffering, far more risk averse than the Iranians are. And because of that discrepancy, because of that gap, it's not really a question of who is winning. It's a question of what are you willing to do. And I'll give one final example here. The United States has the upper hand when it comes to military power. That's not debatable, and no one, including the Iranians, has tried to claim otherwise. But the United States is not willing to use all that military power because of the price correlated and associated with that use of power. Let's give Pickaxe Mountain for an example. The US has the troops, has the ability, has the assets to go in, take over, and dismantle the nuclear assets in Pickaxe Mountain. But they're not doing it because that will, by definition, carry a long trail of cost in human lives, cost in assets lost, cost in financial cost, and a political cost of the Iranian retaliation to other countries in the area. And because of that, even though the power is there, existent, and available, but it's not being used, or the willingness to use it is not there, because of those things, well, you see how the things don't really work in the same way that you would expect. And that's the nature of warfare in front of our eyes right now. The nature of warfare is that when we're fighting an asymmetrical war, and there is a side that is fighting for survival and willing to ruin almost everything, both its own assets and the assets of others, human, financial, and infrastructure and logistics, well, it makes it very hard to have a distinctive or definitive victory over the other side. And that is the state of the war right now. Iran does not need to win to be able to have the upper hand when it comes to perception and the continuity of this war. And that is exactly the catch that the White House and Donald Trump, and of course several other countries in the Gulf, are in right now. They have the upper hand. They are stronger when it comes to military power, and yet the Iranians are winning when it comes with the public perception battle, and of course, when it comes to combating the threat of terrorism that they have presented to the world.
Mati, we're now moving from the question of where are Iran's nuclear facilities to a much more dangerous question. Where is the nuclear material itself, and who controls it when the regime enters survival mode?
I think that's a really problematic question in the sense that the nuclear topic that we keep going back to is a symptom of the greater problem that we have with Iran. And the greater problem is that of all the major items that Israel and the United States went to war over, none have been removed from the table. All are relatively or very close to the same starting point that they were. Some are actually worse. And just to number a few, you have the nuclear program, you have the proxy warfare, you have the Strait of Hormuz, and you have the regime change, which is sort of like this underlying and behind the scenes goal for this entire project. And because of that, because all these items are still unsolved and on the table, we have a problem. The United States and Israel, by extension, can't just go back home and say, done, job well done, because it's not well done, because the war is not over, because this isn't resolved in any significant way. And let's talk about the nuclear program right now. Last year, Prime Minister Netanyahu and Donald Trump decisively told us repeatedly that the Iranian nuclear program has been pushed back multiple years, and they said it has been destroyed, or major components of it have been destroyed. We now know that those statements are not true. They were not true back then, and they're not true right now. Even though the big facilities, Isfahan, Natanz, several others, were severely bombed, when you look at the major components that make up the long-term ability of the Iranian regime to manufacture nuclear bombs, they still hold the majority of those capabilities. The enriched uranium, the centrifuge infrastructure to enrich uranium, the know-how of how to create the systems and operate them, and also the vehicle of delivery, which is the ballistic missiles that we have discovered during this last war, has a longer range than what we previously knew. Combine all of those things, and this is an issue that has to remain on the table and must be resolved. And I want to say something clear here. The United States and Israel as strong as our militaries are, and as active as we can be in military action, we can't use just military action to fully remove the Iranian nuclear program. That's simply not possible. It's not possible because of the fact that it is embedded deep within the population, the experts and the leaders and the documentation. It's too many people in too many facilities to be able to try and control all of it just through military campaigns. There has to be diplomatic action. There has to be cooperation ultimately on the Iranian side. And I want to say this clearly. In the past, to a certain degree, the Iranians did cooperate. And also in the past, Israel, together with the United States, carried out a very long list of clandestine operations in which we set back and damaged the Iranian nuclear program. That has to continue. Pickaxe Mountain or no Pickaxe Mountain, we need to eliminate the Iranian ability, but more importantly, we need to remove their desire to push towards a bomb. That's the bottom line here. A bombing mission in Pickaxe Mountain might be successful in setting back their nuclear program, but even if it is, I seriously doubt it would be more than a few months, maybe 1 year max, in the delay of the program, because there's enriched material in different locations, because enriched material can be purchased from countries that feel like they have nothing to lose. North Korea, perhaps. Pakistan, perhaps. Russia, maybe, depending on how bad things go with the Ukraine war and the involvement of the United States in that campaign. And of course, China. So again, there's so many moving pieces here. Ultimately, most countries, even with substantial pressure, when they have money and they have time, they are ultimately able to reach a nuclear military capability. That is the sad truth here. You can delay it, and Israel has delayed it for more than a decade, but ultimately we need the cooperation of the Iranian regime, and that comes with or regime change, which is one option, or them feeling like they have nothing more to do but to capitulate, but to give in to the demands of the United States to have supervision and removal of the main components of their nuclear program. That is the truth. In the short term, there is a possibility of carrying out substantial military action against Pickaxe Mountain. That is an option that's on the table. But again, we're talking months and not a on-off, a binary solution to the nuclear program. And I want to give an alternative example. Some countries had nuclear programs, had a military strike on them, and gave up on that program. But they gave up on the program because their regime fell apart or was already weakened. Syria is an example like that, where Israel carried out an attack and removed one of their facilities. Iraq had a nuclear facility, a reactor that was in construction and was eliminated by the Israeli Air Force using American fighter jets. And the reason we were successful is because they only had one facility and were not able to rebuild it again after that. But other countries that had the time, Gaddafi, the head of Libya, North Korea under the Kims, they ultimately were able to obtain nuclear capabilities. And it's just a question of time when you have enough money, enough time, and are willing to sacrifice almost anything to create that capability. So the long-term solution always goes through diplomatic plus ongoing substantial military pressure. That is the reality before this war started and also after it ends.
Mati, is the Middle East entering a phase in which Iran is no longer trying to win the war, but instead trying to create a permanent reality where no one can defeat it without setting the entire region on fire?
I need to think about that question, because I don't think Iran was planning to win to begin with. That might be just a fallacy in our mind, in the sense that we expected them to have this assumption that they would win, that they would beat someone, the Americans or Israelis. I don't think Iran was planning to do that. Iran was planning to resist. Iran was planning to persevere. Iran, the regime, was planning to survive these attacks. And for the most part, they have survived these attacks. That's the truth. They have survived these attacks. And so far, not only have they survived, but they've been able to supercharge their threat of violence against their neighbors, the threat of attacks against ships in the Strait of Hormuz, to the degree that they are now the tone setters, the decision makers when it comes to the situation in the Persian Gulf, in the Strait of Hormuz, and I'd say by extension almost in the Middle East. They've been able to put enough fear in the hearts of the Saudis, the Emiratis, and others to the point where they will not publicly oppose them or go against them. And more importantly, where there's no decisive way to stop their intervention, their meddling, their damage. And I'd say more so, without a very complicated chain of events that involves China using a bunch of their oil reserves, they would have also been successful in causing the price of global oil to go through the roof. And by the way, this is a much longer story that we should talk about in a different time, but they did close much of the oil traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. And the global demand for oil is a very fixed graph. It doesn't change and fluctuate. They were able to successfully close off much of the traffic of oil through the Strait of Hormuz till this day. Now, it did cost them, it did damage them, but they were successful in that. And again, Iran doesn't need to win. Iran needs to intimidate. Iran needs to scare. Iran needs to put fear and terrorize the neighbors sufficiently where they are afraid to go against them, where they're afraid to attack them. And I want to say something. Also, the U.S. has been susceptible to that pressure, because when you're going against an adversary such as Iran, and it's clear at this point that they don't really care what happens. You can bomb their coastal facilities, you can bomb their grid, you can eliminate their leadership. They keep fighting. They don't care about the losses to their population. They don't care about losses to their economy. They don't care about the long-term damage to their GDP, etc. They're not interested. The IRGC, the extremists that are at the helm of Iran, they want to watch the world burn. They have a religious extremist ideology that is behind the entire way they operate. And that dictates, that informs the way they approach this entire equation that we're looking at. And it's a very different way than the way we look at the world, a different way than the way the United States looks at the world. And the actions that they're carrying out speak for themselves. They don't need to win. They want to succeed in surviving. And they have. And to top that off, they've also been successful in proving that they are willing to terrorize the economy of the countries neighboring them again and again and again. And that is the equation that the Trump White House needs to break and the Israeli Air Force needs to crack. Without being able to do that, we continue almost indefinitely being in this ongoing cat and mouse game against the Iranian extremist regime.
So thank you very much, Mati Shoshani. That really helped me better understand what we are facing. And to all of you, keep spreading the truth. What's the first step? Hit the subscribe button. Check if you're subscribed to TBN Israel, okay? Many of you are watching and not subscribers yet. Let's change that. It will help us a lot. Also, look us up on our social media accounts, Yair, Pinto, and Mati Shoshani. And also, pray for the situation. Prayer works. God is listening. A drone struck 2 gas vessels inside Egypt's Damietta port and started a fire on the American-owned Inneragos Winter, which then spread to the gas-long Salem. Egyptian authorities confirmed a deliberate drone attack. No casualties were reported, and the attacker has not been identified. How did an unmanned aircraft reach one of the Eastern Mediterranean's most important gas terminals without being stopped? What do you think about this in the comments? Let me know. Damietta is a commercial energy hub near the Suez Canal. It's connected to Egypt's liquefied natural gas industry and supply routes that serve Europe. 3 launch routes are also being examined. A Houthi launch from Yemen would require a flight exceeding 2,000 kilometers through monitored airspace. A launch from Iraq would be shorter, but the drone would still cross Jordan, Syria, or another defended corridor. So the most troubling possibility is a launch from the Mediterranean itself. A merchant ship, fishing vessel, or contained civilian platform could carry a drone close to the Egyptian coast, launch below the normal radar picture, and then disappear amongst ordinary maritime traffic. That method would reduce the warning time and complicate the protection of Israeli gas platforms, ports, desalination facilities, and also other plants and coastal power facilities. So the investigation has not established that Iran or one of its proxies carried out the attack. However, the operation fits the pressure strategy that the Revolutionary Guards prepared during the ceasefire. Senior Quds Force officials used the pause to coordinate with Hezbollah, with the Houthis, and the Shia militias in Iraq. Their objective was to create several controlled crises if American strikes resumed, while avoiding one obvious attack that would automatically trigger a full-scale retaliation. Tehran supplies weapons, advisors, intelligence, training, and strategic direction. Each organization retains enough independence to choose targets and preserve Iran's ability to deny direct responsibility. Recent attacks follow that design. Missiles targeted American forces in Jordan. Drones threatened Saudi oil infrastructure. Shipping faced pressure near Hormuz and the Red Sea. The Damietta strike carried that danger into the Mediterranean. Iran has also tightened its influence over Hezbollah's recovery. Revolutionary Guard commanders were reported placed inside the organization's leadership and their structure after Israel eliminated senior Hezbollah figures and damaged its command systems. The Houthis remain important to this network, but they are facing pressure inside Yemen. Government forces recently stopped an infiltration attempt in the south and killed 5 Houthi attackers. The setback followed the killing of the senior Houthi intelligence commander and one escort near the airport in Sana'a. The gunmen escaped, and no organization claimed responsibility. These incidents do not prove that the movement is collapsing. They show that its security system can be penetrated and that internal struggles over command and resources may be increasing. Jordan is preparing for the next stage. Amman warned Baghdad that any attack launched from Iraqi territory towards Jordan will receive an immediate military response. American and also Saudi aircrafts recently struck command posts, weapons warehouses, and logistical sites connected to Iran-backed factions in Iraq, killing at least 20 fighters. Local reports also placed Iranian advisors amongst the dead. Baghdad now faces a problem that cannot be solved with a statement. Several militias are legally connected to Iraq's security systems, yet some maintain separate commanders, weapons, financing, and direct relations with the Revolutionary Guards of Iran. So, if Iraq cannot restrain them, then Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Syria may strike inside the Iraqi territory. Iraq would then move from being a launch platform to becoming the battlefield itself. And before we continue, I'm calling on you to help us share the truth. You can do that by liking this report, sharing, and making a donation. Help us share the truth of what's happening in this land with people around the world. Okay? Subscribe to TBN Israel on YouTube. But if you want more, you can get behind-the-scene looks, first-hand reportings, and moments of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel by going to tbn.org/journeys/boots. That's tbn.org/journeys/boots. And you can also text the word boots to 316-316 and receive direct updates from TBN Israel. When Mati and I report from the ground, you are seeing this region through the eyes of people who actually live here, experience these events, and know what's happening, and also feel it. So thank you so much for being with us. And this campaign that Iran and the United States is increasing is just reaching the infrastructure that cannot move and cannot hide. So water utilities in at least 7 American states reported cyber intrusions that are affecting the operational systems. More than 30 community systems were targeted in Minnesota, while Michigan later reported incidents involving 9 utilities. Investigators have not publicly identified the attackers. Iran-linked hackers remained a central possibility because federal agencies had already warned that Iranian actors were exploiting internet-connected industrial controllers used in water and also in energy facilities. So these controllers, known as PLCs, they operate pumps, valves, pressure systems, and also chemical treatment equipment. Changing a password, erasing a configuration, or disabling the automatic pressure control can force a facility to shut down or to move to a manual operator. But the latest attacks caused limited disruptions, but authorities said that the water remains safe. The incident demonstrates that the access is vulnerable, the security is being able to be breached. This is not a proof of an attempt to contaminate the drinking water. It just shows that the cyber warfare is ongoing. So Israel's National Cyber Directorate says that Iranian attacks target the Israeli sectors every single day, including the water system. Israeli teams are exchanging all the information with American partners and reviewing whether the same methods could be repeated here. The concern is based on experience. In 2020, Iranian attackers penetrated systems that are connected to the Israeli water and the sewage facilities. One reported objective was manipulating chlorine levels, which could have forced pumps to shut down. In 2023, the Revolutionary Guards linked Cyber AV Avengers. This is the group targeting American facilities that used Israeli-made Untronic controllers. So employees at one Pennsylvania facility moved to manual operations after automatic pressure controls were compromised. So for the Gulf states, the danger is even more severe and direct, because desalination supplies around 42% of the water in the United Arab Emirates, roughly 70% in Saudi Arabia, 86% in Oman, and about 90% in Kuwait. Water, ports, gas, terminals, and power stations therefore create pressure without requiring an attack on a military base. Damage can disrupt the daily life, weaken the public confidence, and force governments to redirect the defensive resources. Another intelligence effort is examining a darker possibility. Reports indicate that British, American, and also French officers have tried to identify suspected Iranian chemical weapons storage sites, narrowing attention to 4 possible locations. The concern centers on the nerve agents or other toxic compounds that could be carried by drones or transferred to a proxy. There's no public evidence of an immediate chemical strike, and the reported sites have not been independently confirmed. Chemical delivery by drone is technically difficult because the material must disperse at the correct altitude and remain concentrated despite wind and humidity. Even a limited capability, however, would change the protective equipment, the medical readiness, and the targeting procedures all across the region. So the United States military is also reconsidering how to pressure Iran, and a senior intelligence official at the Central Command asked analysts for creative and unconventional ideas after weeks of strikes that failed to produce a decisive political breakthrough. The request does not mean that the Pentagon has selected a new operation. It shows that airstrikes have not solved the central problem. Iran can lose radars, missile facilities, and infrastructure while preserving critical assets underneath the ground. The clearest example is the uranium buried at Isfahan. American intelligence assesses that Iran may retain a narrow access route to approximately 440.9 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. The material is stored as uranium hexafluoride gas inside specialized cylinders, reaching its required excavations, radiation monitoring, secure transportation, and protection from another strike. American agencies say that they are continuously watching the complex and are confident that they could detect an attempt to move the stockpile. Recent satellite imagery showed engineering activity and also heavy equipment around the damaged tunnel entrances. This is although the purpose remains uncertain. Seizing the material would be far more difficult than striking vehicles that are leaving the site. Special forces will need to enter deep inside Iran, secure the area, clear the damaged or the mined access points, and remove radioactive cargo under fire. President Trump has rejected a large ground invasion for now. The deepest facilities may survive even powerful conventional bombs, leaving Washington with monitoring, negotiation, repeated strikes, or a limited ground operation. Inside Iran, the regime is tightening control as external pressure grows. Authorities continue arresting and executing people accused of assisting Israeli intelligence, photographing military locations, or transferring wartime information. The executions punish alleged espionage and warn ordinary Iranians that sharing images or locations can be treated as a capital wartime offense. The Gaza front is separate, but it reflects the same dispute over enforcement. Israeli aircraft eliminated 2 Hamas commanders in targeted strikes, including a Nukhba cell leader involved in the attack on Nir Oz. A proposed 15-point roadmap would transfer civil and security authority to a new Palestinian administration, remove heavy weapons, deploy an international stabilization force, and connect Israeli withdrawal to verified disarmament. Israel says that withdrawal cannot advance faster than the removal of weapons and military infrastructure. The central question is who verifies that Hamas no longer controlled armed units, tunnels, rockets, or the ability to rebuild them. The diplomatic window with Iran is open, but the drone over Damietta, the cyber intrusions into water systems, militia threats from Iraq, and uranium beneath the Isfahan facility show how many separate triggers could close it. And will the negotiations restrain the Revolutionary Guards, or will Iran use the pause to prepare the next coordinated strike? Let me know what you think about this. In the meantime, keep spreading the truth. Hit the subscribe button on TBN Israel, hit the share button, leave a comment, let me know where you're watching from, and keep praying for the situation. And we'll see you again tomorrow for another update of Boots on the Ground. Want to see Israel and Jerusalem? Sorry? Come with me. Come. Okay? This here, that's the old city of Jerusalem and the mountain of olives behind me. Come here when you can. Leave us a comment. Let me know when you're in the area, and we'd love to have you in the studio.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.